Hello everyone, this is Metroid Nerd number 9001 and this channel has just hit 1,000 subscribers, which is quite incredible. Now I say just, but it's actually been a couple weeks. Sorry about the delay, I've been a bit, let's say, distracted by a certain video game lately. What, were you expecting something else? But I wanted to make a video to commemorate the achievement. But I wanted to do something unique for this channel. So I asked my viewers to submit some questions for me to answer, and we got a few responses, so let's go through them. I received multiple questions asking how I got into ROM hacks, and how someone who wants to get into it would start. I personally got into ROM hacks by watching the YouTuber Shy Guy Express back when I was in middle school. Maybe even late elementary school, I can't remember at this point. But I was really into Super Metroid, and when I first saw him playing hacks like Super Metroid Redesign and Super Metroid Z Factor, I thought, this is incredible. I want to be able to do something like that. At the time, I was also really into the game Little Big Planet, which if you've played the game series, then you know that level editing is a major component of those games. And it was also my favorite part of those games, and I saw the idea of making ROM hacks as a bit of an extension of that. Being in middle school, not really knowing very much about how computers work or anything like that, I tried and failed to do anything, like even opening Smile, the Super Metroid editor from the time. Even that was too much for me. I couldn't figure it out. It took until I was in high school and I had started watching some of Shy Guy Express's streams that I finally got a bit of advice on how to actually open the ROMs, which mostly just came down to my lack of knowledge. But I had a lot of ideas for hacks that I wanted to make back in middle school, but by that point I had realized a lot of it was a bit unrealistic to do, especially for a first hack. So for my first hack, I just kind of started doing whatever. I just started, editing rooms and just kind of doing whatever felt interesting. And slowly I started learning, just kind of by that experimentation, how to build rooms and what actually you should do when you're designing something like that. And slowly that morphed into the idea of, okay, I can start by just making a simple half hack, which is a hack that keeps the same map as vanilla. But I'd already taken some of the original vanilla rooms and at least switched them to different tile sets. And so I had the idea of, what if I keep the same map shape as vanilla, but I don't connect the rooms in the same way? And that slowly morphed into Super Metroid Recovery. And I named it that because there was so many times through my own incompetence and inexperience that I lost a lot of progress on the hack. And so there were multiple times where I managed to recover all of that lost data and work. So in honor of that, you could say I named the hack Super Metroid Recovery. Now back in my day, we didn't have this fancy schmancy Super Metroid Automagical V-Point tool to do all of our V-pointing for us. If you know anything about pointers and the fact that we had to edit them manually, you'll know the pain of what I was talking about. I have multiple sheets of paper that are just covered in me writing down pointers and addresses so that I wouldn't forget where I had used them and where I had made some free space and all that kind of stuff. And then to keep track of my progress, I just printed a map of vanilla Super Metroid and just highlighted all of the rooms that I had finished building, so I could kind of visually keep track of where I'd done a lot of work and where I had a lot of work left to do. And I still have something similar now with Quarry. I have a Excel spreadsheet that has the entire map of the hack that I'm slowly filling in as I'm building out rooms. Now, to answer the more specific question of what my recommendations are to someone trying to get into ROM hacking, I would recommend just playing a lot of ROM hacks first, just to get the feel of what people think is good and what other people have done, because a lot of hacking is derivative of other hacks and derivative of the vanilla game. But then also joining the Metroid Construction forums and the Metroid Construction Discord server, there's a lot of extremely knowledgeable people there. And yeah, sometimes it can be a little bit tough to penetrate a kind of tight-knit community, but we're pretty welcoming to newcomers as long as you're willing to put in the work, because it's a lot of work putting in ROM hacks, and one of the big hurdles is just understanding how much you have to put into it. But it's a really rewarding experience when you finish. Like, the feeling of seeing other people playing and enjoying your hack is second to none. Speaking of Shy Guy Express, he asks, what is your favorite part of Metroid? The music, the enemies, the atmosphere, the puzzles, etc. I would have to say at its core, it's the atmosphere, but a lot of that is tied into stuff like the music and the graphic design, because you can get a lot of good Metroidvanias in a lot of places, but something that's particularly called to me about Metroid, and that's kept me with the series, is that atmosphere. Even when it's different between games, it still feels very cohesive and has its own identity that I really enjoy. The Pie Guy 1 asks how I learned to use ASM and any new tricks or interesting things I found that I could do with it. So I learned how to use assembly by, I know this is kind of a boring answer, but by taking a class in college. Of course, it's not the same assembly language as Super Metroid uses. I took a class in ARM assembly, but a lot of the same concepts are very applicable to 65816, which is what the Super Nintendo runs on. So I just took a lot of what I learned in that class, started looking at the disassembly and working with people in Metroid construction who knew more about assembly than I did, and just started doing things. One of my first major projects with assembly was making the Power Rush item, and I had a lot of help making it, but slowly, as I got better, I could do more things on my own. If I'm building a room and I need something done, I can just be like, oh, I could just build a little ASM thing to help me do this. And then that also morphed into some of the larger projects, like my Samurai mini boss and the Icicle enemy. One of my favorite little tricks you can do with ASM is quite technical, but it involves using a set of bytes as a state indicator in the most efficient way possible, that you can use the most significant bit of the variable, and you can save time by setting that instead of anything else, because that bit determines if the number is negative. And if you just load that into the accumulator register, you can immediately branch based on whether the number is positive or negative, which saves some cycles and a little bit of space over having to do some kind of comparison. It's a micro optimization, but those types of things make me smile about doing assembly programming. It's mostly an obsolete skill, but it's something I enjoy doing because I kind of think of it like a puzzle in many ways. Ridiculous Life asks what my favorite Metroid game is and what the best first playthrough I ever had was. It seems a bit tacky and a bit obvious, but my favorite Metroid game is Super Metroid. It's kind of hard to dedicate, 7 years, 8 years of my life to editing and hacking a game and have it not be my favorite, unless my favorite was Metroid Prime or something, which we don't really have tools for. But no, my favorite is Super Metroid. I've loved that game since I was a kid. As for the best first playthrough, it's hard to remember because I played a lot of these games so long ago, but if I had to guess, it would probably be Metroid Prime 2, because my playthroughs of the Prime games were among the first Metroid games that I played without really seeing much of them beforehand, because I had seen Super Metroid plenty by watching my older brother play it, and then Metroid Fusion and Metroid Zero Mission I had seen a lot online, but I didn't have that much exposure to the Prime games before I actually played them. But Prime 2 has always been my favorite of the Prime games, so if I had to take a guess, it was probably Prime 2 was my favorite first playthrough. And that's all the questions that I got from people. Not very many, but this is still a growing channel. I want to thank you all again for all the support you've given, especially after my latest video. I did not expect it to blow up as much as it did, but all the positive feedback from it is very heartwarming. It really helps bring the motivation up for me to keep working on this, seeing that people are so excited for the hack. But yeah, I'd say that's about it. Thank you all for tuning in, and here's to the next 1,000 subscribers.